Nothing is normal post-COVID-19. Businesses are trying to adopt to new normal. Let's see how will e-commerce change in the post-COVID-19 era. In this panel discussion, top e-retailers will discuss if the new situation will take e-commerce channel ahead by a couple of years or will it stagnate the growth once we are past this crisis. I would like to invite Varun Jain, special correspondent etretail.com to moderate this panel discussion.
Hello, viewers. I am Varun Jain and I welcome you all to ET Retail Business Leadership Summit. The topic of this panel discussion is how e-commerce will change in the post-COVID-19 era. We are joined by eminent leaders from the e-commerce sector to talk more on this. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Amrish Murthy, who is co-founder and CEO of Pepperfry, Amar Nagram, CEO of Myntra, Amisha Jain, CEO of Zivame, Vidwan Annie, India Country Manager at eBay, and Mr. Abhijit Singhi, Managing Director and Senior Partner at Boston Consulting Group. Thank you very much to all of you for being part of this discussion. Let me start this conversation by asking each of the panelists about the impact that they have seen on their businesses in the last 6 months and how are things looking now. So we'll start with Amar. Amar, what do you think? How has been the last 6 months for Myntra? And we can keep it short, and then we'll keep the discussion rolling.
Thanks, Varun. Thanks for having me on this panel. It's an honor to be with this set of panel. Happy to see everyone on this virtual platform. Coming to your question, the first few months have been really hard on the business because we deal with fashion and fashion was not a necessity. And as per the government policies and procedures, we were not operational for the first 2 months. But what happened once the Unlock 1.0 started is the latent demand started coming back, and which is one of the reasons why we were able to bounce back. 4 months after that, where we are right now, we are looking at a very healthy customer relationship being built. In fact, COVID helped us build a very emotional connect with our customers, and today we understand our customers much better than we ever did. So it's actually a blessing in disguise for our business.
And Amrish, coming to you, furniture is a difficult business and discretionary item, if we can say, to begin with, and an expensive affair. How do you see the developments happening over the last 6 months, and where are you now?
Yeah, so especially just as the lockdown had started, the business had taken a toll. I mean, our supply chains were closed, and that's key to getting products across to the customer. Somewhere mid-May, when things started opening up, happy to report that, frankly, every week from then, our business kind of just kept on doubling. As we sit today, we're larger than we used to be pre-COVID. And I think that's a function of a few things. Firstly, it's a function of the things that we did when things were under lockdown, which is that we focused a lot on ensuring that we simplified our business. So which meant that everything that we could do, net of interacting with the customer because everything was locked down, we did, which is we simplified our traffic flows, we simplified the user funnel, we did a whole bunch of changes to site. All of that saw us in very good light as things opened up. The second thing that I think has happened is more, let's say, in the context of the customer demographic, which is the fact that I think because we've all spent a lot of time at home, earlier the things that we used to put up with when it came to furniture, we would accept things as not being perfect. But now that we spend a lot of time at home and we've realized the value of all that surrounds us at home, I think there's an increasing consciousness amongst customers to not put up with something that's just not perfect for them. And therefore, that's resulted in an increase in demand for us. And I think it's a fundamental shift in consumer behavior, and hopefully that augurs well for the business in the longer term.
And Amisha, your assessment of the business, how is it looking for you, and what was the impact on Zivame's business?
Yeah, so Varun, I think it's great to hear them talk. Actually, 6 months in, I feel actually really good because I think for the first time I get a chance to say that, look, it's been good. It's been good 6 months. I think for us, the biggest realization was that while the government thought that we were a non-essential category, the consumer was screaming out saying that, look, there is significant demand for it, right? And they needed something and they needed it badly, right? And so for us, what pained us in that period of 45 days is we saw demand come in, but we couldn't service, right? But I think I kind of relate to what Amrish said, that I think what we did is a lot of reflection, a lot of tweaking, and how do you respond in the short term, right? And given that we changed a lot of the ways we do business, we changed our go to market, we changed the way we look at our product mix, a lot of other things, and also fundamentally today I think the brand stands in a very different place. So I think some of the work that we did, more being conscious around what the consumer was looking for, I think it's been very heartening to see the way the loyal consumers came back, how the new consumers have kind of adapted and sort of, we've onboarded them on the platform. So all in all, I think COVID pushed us to do a little bit of that house cleaning one should anyways do on a very regular basis. I think the only thing I would highlight is that I think this has been probably the toughest phase for the workforce than anybody else. And I don't say it because of COVID itself, but I think this is the first time India has seen something like this where, things got slower. We've always seen a climb. We've always seen, blue skies. And so I think adapting and learning, I think that's been the most tremendous journey that I have seen for people, how people have developed. But yeah, I mean, hand in hand goes the fact that they've carried the business through also. So it's been good.
Great. Great to hear that. Vidmay, coming to eBay, eBay helps sellers to export their products to different markets. You help them. So what is the situation there? How are your sellers responding to the situation? And have you seen a surge or a dip? What is it like?
Yeah, thanks for having me over here.
Yeah.
As far as eBay is concerned, like you mentioned, we are just in the exports business at this point of time. And we had an interesting situation where our post-site demand went through the roof. Now, just to give you context, the e-commerce penetration in the US went up from 15% to 32% approximately in 3 months. It's a 10-year growth in 3 months. And we had significant demand coming in. And then we had a hard lockdown in India. So all the supply chains as well as logistics were completely stopped. So we were in a situation, one, to salvage the customer experience of already purchased products, and also how do you deal with the immediate hard lockdown. Like most of my panelists just mentioned, we focused on our brilliant basics for almost 3 months, right? We didn't have the logistics supply chains. We figured out how the parcels which were in transit, how do you reroute them? How do you ensure that the customer experience doesn't suffer? You need to understand that we compete in a global marketplace. We compete with sellers from outside of India, and they didn't have such a hard lockdown. So most of the business, unfortunately, we lost because of the hard lockdown. And happy to note, once the unlock process started, and we fixed some of our basic aspects of our seller acquisition, seller onboarding, as well as seller distribution aspects of things, we definitely have seen significant growth coming for our sellers. Sellers who are operating right now are seeing better than pre-COVID run rates for us. And that's pretty encouraging for all of us. And also the interest levels for sellers who refused to be on exports earlier is now coming very fast and in a furious fashion. So overall, I think a very happy situation to be in. And also the fact that we had a downtime of almost 3 months to reflect upon things that we normally don't prioritize. This kind of gets bumped down in our prioritization. We kind of went back, fixed on it. So you would notice that we've come back very strong from a seller messaging point of view. We are building a brand right now. So most of these stuff is now come to the fore.
And Abhi, you have been listening to all the other panelists very keenly, and they're all happy with the way the business is shaping up now. You track the industry very closely. What is your assessment of the situation? How is it in the last 6 months for the e-commerce players?
No, so I think the way I would simply put it is, if we look at the consumption overall, I think in some sense we have probably lost 2 to 3 years, because of the decline which has happened. But if you look at e-commerce, I think it has gained 2 to 3 years. I think so. If we take the two in tandem, I think this has been obviously a situation where e-commerce has really risen to the occasion. And I think that the typical consumer barriers to e-commerce adoption actually have come down. The way I like to think about it is, on an e-commerce experience or transaction, there are probably, 3 moments of truth. There is one when you go to the website. The second is when you actually place the order. and the third is when you actually get the delivery, right? And once consumers get a good experience across the three touch points and have got it a few times, then they become customers for life. I think 180 days or 187 days actually has provided many more touch points for consumer to experience e-commerce across diverse categories. And I think from that perspective, it is a situation where I personally think that the e-commerce adoption is going to be a sticky one.
So my question to other panelists is, as we have heard Abhi saying that e-commerce has gone ahead 2-3 years. Do you think that's the case in your businesses? Do you think there's been a positive sign? Any of the panelists can take up this.
No, so I was going to say, yeah, absolutely. I think across the board. So what I would say is, I think on one end there's demand conversation. I think most often we only talk about demand, right? In terms of whether demand is coming from a certain tier or a certain type of consumers. We have a set of women consumers, so to say, right? What we're seeing is a couple of things. I think acceleration in demand coming from city tiers. Right. So what one expected as a movement over a period of time, I think that has happened extremely fast. And I'm surprised to see the numbers I see every day where tier 2, tier 3 just seem to be scaling, right? Which also tells you there's a part of it where consumers have moved and working out of their hometowns, but at the same time, there is definitely new demand coming out of there, right? So I think that acceleration I've seen, adoption we've seen, right? What we've also seen, and particularly I can talk about our category, right? Because I would say that that's probably one of the last few categories that kind of moved into the e-com space because of the other barriers that this category has. And it's got nothing to do with the channel of service. And this has allowed is that women are looking for what they usually shop. They're looking for assistance. They're looking to come to the platform for it, right? But I'll take the conversation of e-com one step forward. And I think it is less about e-commerce as a platform or a Zivame app per se. I think it's more to do with a contactless platform per se. So I think what we've seen quite heartening is some of the other mobile platforms working, right? Whether it is a WhatsApp-based service or whether it is, multi-level service. So there are a lot of these neighborhood services that have come up, and those are some of the things that we are seeing moving. And I believe that this would have been actually a slower journey, but that has accelerated a lot for us, like the word of mouth, etc. So all in all, absolutely gained a few years, not from a demand perspective, but at the same time, some of the this also allowed us to kind of look inwards and say, how do I position the brand? How do I position the mix? What kind of mix do I need, right? And what that has done is change the fundamentals of the business as well. So we've used this opportunity to kind of say that where's the brand positioned? What is the mix you're offering? How are you offering to the consumers? What is the real price value equation here? And so it has changed the P&L structure completely. It has changed the unit economics, and it's quite heartening to see where things have gone. So I think demand is just one input parameter, into all of this. That consumption definitely we've seen. But I think all in all, it's also leading towards a very healthy business. And that I feel is a huge acceleration from a vertical player perspective, especially for us.
Ambrish, you were saying something.
Yeah, I just wanted to call out that I think there's been a shift in market dynamics. And speaking of the furniture category, one of the curious things about the category used to be that close to 85-90% of the category used to be unorganized, right? So which meant that effectively this was folks getting carpenters at home, getting stuff done by them, or it was people buying from mom and pop stores across India. Now, I think what's happened over the last 6 months is there has been an inherent shift in the degree of organization in the category. What it would have resulted in, nobody knows the data yet, but I'm certain studies will come out over the next few months, which will indicate that a lot more of the categories got organized. Even though overall consumption in the category might be lower, e-commerce is taking a larger chunk of the overall of the consumers in the organized space. And I think that's a fundamental shift that's happened. It's the kind of shift which suddenly makes customers comfortable buying ready-made furniture, right? And that doesn't change in a hurry, right? So if that kind of shift has happened, which I believe it has, it is here to stay. So that's the point I wanted to make.
I have a slightly different view on this, and for that, I'll actually take a step back. Flipkart Group, Flipkart and Myntra, the longest standing e-commerce players in the market, they've created so many triggers for e-commerce to happen in the country. And that's one of the reasons why e-commerce kind of happened in many ways. And some of these triggers being, lack of trust the consumers had on a platform like Flipkart. Like, why would I buy from somebody who I don't know when I'm not touching the product? Cash on delivery was one answer to that, saying that you get the product, then you pay to us, which again helped us in any way on a different note with the credit card penetrations being low and all of it. But the primary cost was to earn the trust. The second thing about trust was, will my product come in shape in the form in which I ordered it, which is when we went and did our own logistics instead of depending on the third logistics. So there were, if you think of these investments made by the group, these were heavy investments to kind of trigger this e-commerce momentum in the country. What COVID did was it actually accelerated this acceleration without any of us, any of the players here and any of us in the market having to do anything. COVID kind of accelerated that adoption. That's for sure that happened. But having said that, I want to call out a few things here. Not every e-commerce player benefited from COVID. In fact, I can actually call out what the panelists here are saying. Businesses that listened to the customer, that acted to the customer's new need state, and the businesses that were able to put relevant selection, whatever the category in which they're operating, is what actually made them take the opportunity. And to Abhik's point, I believe it was more than 3 years of acceleration that happened, but it kind of restricted to 2 to 3 years because we as e-commerce players were not able to serve the entire demand coming to us because of other constraints. There were workforce constraints, there were supply constraints. If we could actually serve the demand that came to us, we would have actually accelerated by more than 3 years. In fact, a lot of demand were not able to serve in a way where we take pride in. The third important point I want to make is, I'm not sure if this is a permanent shift that is happening, and I'm calling it out with a bit of caution here, because during COVID, what e-commerce players did was not entirely different from what we used to do before pre-COVID. There were tweaks we did to our business models, there were tweaks we did to our selection, but overall shopping experience of online didn't change significantly from what it used to be. Yes, there were contactless delivery. Safety is the top of the concern right now for the consumers. And that's where e-commerce actually did phenomenal job. What I want to actually call out as a caution is, when the vaccine comes out, when people are comfortable stepping out, will e-commerce still win against offline? That's something we started thinking. That's something we started acting on. Is it just going to be pricing? Is it just going to be selection that we are going to win? Or are there other things, especially in fashion, where there is a try and feel of the fabric, try and feel of the style, setting, the fit? There are a lot of things that the e-commerce is yet to meet the offline standards. So that's where our investments have started. So I would like to call it out that it's not that, yes, COVID has helped e-commerce to now gain. There's still work to be done by the e-commerce players to truly take the advantage of. Otherwise, it will just go back to what it was before.
Vidmay, you want to add to this?
Sure. So, Varun, I wanted to add a different dimension to it, more on the supply side, right? I think we've seen a significant mindset shift within the SMEs and MSMEs. We work with thousands and lakhs of MSMEs. I think digitization within these MSMEs as well as small and medium artisans is also accelerated significantly. With the hard lockdown coming in, now most of the SMEs as well as artisans are now looking at means beyond what they used to do at this point of time. And initial hesitation of folks to, for that matter, get online, and second, to export was significant in terms of them coming on to the mainstream with a lot of paperwork and where there's digitalization and training required. I think that barrier is moved right now. I think that enablement is now much more easier for us. So our organic numbers of sellers onboarding has gone through the roof. And right now we are looking at the base of training some of these guys very different from what we used to do earlier. So from that point of view, I think there's a definite mindset shift that has happened within the supplier as well as SME ecosystem. And second is the delivery of the overall training as well as getting growth going, right? So from that point of view, what we are seeing is the enablement is all moving online versus an offline/online hybrid model. Now, most of it right now is happening online. So from that point of view, there is a mindset shift, and also there's a medium shift in terms of how supply is coming on board. And then obviously in terms of online cataloging versus the post-transaction experience, those medium remain where it is.
And as Amar said, that we need to be cautious about how consumers would be buying in the future when the vaccine comes in. But looking at the performance of the e-commerce, the tweaks that we had to make in our business to serve the customers, we can just ask all the panelists as in what kind of change in strategies or tweaks that we have done in our business to, be compatible with the needs of the consumers in the last 6 months, which has helped us to grow.
So Varun, on the previous one, can I just make
Yeah, please.
a point? I think completely agree with Amar. Actually, if the constraints would not have been there, then the adoption would have been much higher. And just to give some anecdotes on that, if you look at China, just for a 2-month lockdown which they had, in FMCG and grocery, which is the least penetrated, there was an increase from about 15% to 24%. But in a short while, it actually came back to 21 odd percent. So it lost some of that. I think in India, because there was the restrictions from a supply side perspective, regulatory perspective, actually the demand would have been much higher. The second thing, and this is something which I've observed both not only in e-commerce, but otherwise, stronger brands actually have gained share. Basically, people who have been able to deliver actually have gained share. And literally, I think the whatever $1 billion question, I think is, will the consumer revert back to business as usual, or will it be the new normal? And if all of us were to be honest, I don't think we have a good answer right now, because you have examples on both sides to say, hey, behavior is going to come back, or it's going to be a new normal. But I think that's going to be the one big thing. But the point which I think all of the panelists made, which is demand side is one, supply side actions are equally important, if not more, because many of them actually are going to spur demand.
So I just want to add actually to a big point here. We are seeing both sides of the world, right? Because we have a significant offline presence as well. And we're seeing about 70% of the demand recover there. So I think at no point in time, one would expect that offline is going to go away or that's not going to thrive, right? The question right now, I guess, is more about, is the demand shifting and are people getting more comfortable with online? And I think absolutely, right? But I think at the same time, I do believe that this whole conversation of e-commerce being a business, right, kind of in my mind changes. I think businesses are brands, businesses are products. And now the question is that one recognizes that this is a channel which started late and has really done extremely well and has gotten this natural push in this time, right? But I think over a period of time, what we'll see is that the lines will very quickly blur. What we see is that our consumers, which were earlier actually not transitioning between our online and our offline, we see a very natural transition between people, right? And so I think now it's a matter of mobile commerce, and that's why I keep kind of going away from, because I think the narrow definition of e-commerce also doesn't stay anymore. I just see how amazing the neighborhood shopping is thriving on your WhatsApp groups, right? And so I feel that there is an alternate medium that is coming up for sure, which will be this mix of both. And I think both are here to stay. The question, I go back to what Amar is saying, the question that we're also answering is, you look at the consumer demand, and to go back to the question that Varun, you asked, which is, what are we doing, right? So we've kind of looked at consumer demand, we've looked at consumer behavior and found significant shifts. Obviously, top of mind right now is safety and hygiene, right? But they have moved forward. They have taken a step forward. We are seeing an opening up of festive as well, right? But what also the consumer is saying is, look, that is all brass tacks. Like, don't talk to me about safety and hygiene as you're doing something great, right? I mean, that I expect from you. I think now what the consumer is saying, what is it that you have for me? And there, I think e-commerce's differentiator is no longer a differentiator. It's not about price anymore. It's no longer about, convenience. It's no longer about payment methods, because that's all, and you'll find a lot of the offline players doing that today as well. And the moment this entire group of people in a year's time kind of are now coming on board, because I've seen a lot of traders, we work a lot with trade partners, and we're seeing them come online as well. So I think as people move to the online world, now your differentiator is you as a brand, and what do you bring? Are you adding value in her life, right? Are you offering her products that meet her requirements? And there, I think the important thing to recognize is that whatever said and done, consumers are shifting their lifestyles slightly, right? There is this thought of saving in our heads. There is this thought which we probably didn't. Like I was saying earlier, it was all blue skies, but now there is the conversation of, oh, maybe my grandparents or my parents told me to save, and now is the time, right? So I think there is a shift, and one has to adapt to those. We are making portfolio shifts quite significantly to adapt to not just the changing lifestyle of the consumer, where she's obviously seeking a lot of things, but she's also asking all of those things at the right price, at the right quality and comfort. And I want to stress that, because most often we think of the consumer as somebody who is looking for value, right? Is looking for a certain price, right? But actually she's also, given these times, she's looking at the right product. Maybe she's going to get rid of bells and whistles, but she's looking for that right product at a price that she believes is right, but the quality of the product is important. I need to make sure that if I'm buying something, it's not about splurging anymore. And hence I am going to make sure that I buy, at least in the near term, right? I'm going to buy something that's going to last me. So I think the quality and comfort are not getting traded off. The bells and whistles are basically what people are willing to trade off, right? So I think still aware, very, very aware consumers, very discerning. And so on one hand, we are kind of shifting our portfolio there. I want to go back to also this point of supply side, right? And I feel that's extremely critical at this point. Probably the largest of lessons would have been around the supply side conversation, right? And building an ecosystem and ensuring that you have this ecosystem that balances itself, right? So when my liquidity went off, I mean, we were down for 40, 45 days, my partners were equally struggling, right? And so how do you build an ecosystem that you know that in the future you can sustain, and businesses only thrive because of that? So I think there's a larger shift in terms of thinking of the supply side, thinking of how, you want to partner with your manufacturing partners. You want to see how you want to go after production. I think it has accelerated the conversation around just in time. So I think the one large shift I believe, at least we've made to our business is thinking, how do I bring product closer to time, closer to demand, right? And I think fashion, apparel, and I'm sure Amar relates to this, apparel industry is one of the few industries that kind of goes and puts a bet on a product 11 months ahead of when the demand is really going to show up, right? It's probably one of the very few industries that does that. And so I think now that acceleration is also coming. So I think those two things married with a change in thinking on technology, and that's a beast in itself, right? Talking tech. So I think those are the 2-3 things that, consumer, product offering, looking at the supply chain, reinventing it there, making it more real time, and then making sure that technology is kind of serving you across the board, making sure it's, more relatable to the consumer. I think those are the few things that we are doing to kind of, get our business a lot more healthy and sort of to scale in the future.
And Amrish, Pepperfry has invested heavily on supply chain. You have your own, you control your supply chain. So was that also a reason for you to, just steer away from this crisis in a much more efficient manner? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, so the supply chain is super important. I mean, I think the overall value chain is what I would focus on. I mean, so the question that was on our mind was, as things got locked down, what would happen to, okay, so there's a fundamental difference fundamentally between the kind of merchants who sell on Pepperfry and the kind of merchants who sell on other horizontals, etc. Right? So a typical seller on other horizontals would be a procurer of products which are manufactured by large manufacturing units. I mean, that constitutes the bulk of the business. Versus in the case of Pepperfry, these are folks who manufacture stuff to be sold for customers. I mean, so they have small manufacturing units, they have the same labor issues, they have, a whole bunch of issues, right? All of that needed to be factored in during this lockdown for us. And I think what we did fairly well was work with our merchants in order to ensure that their value chains don't get disrupted. And I think that worked really well. The fact that we owned our supply chain and therefore we're able to still have the pipes running straight to the merchant's door and therefore service buyers across India, I think was a massive differentiator. And that kind of helped us, so to speak, hit the ground running when things started opening up. I would, however, think that there's one more aspect which has happened, and it's happened with us as a business, and I think it's happened in general, right? So I have always believed that it's the same customer who basically could be walking down in a mall at some point in time, could be on a mobile phone at another point in time, or on a laptop at a third point in time. We have tried as a business never to play God and say that, no, we will not interact with our customer in the offline world, or we will not interact with the customer on a laptop, or we will only interact with her on a mobile phone and stuff like that, right? So it's, I think, the duty of every business to basically interact with her whichever way she wants to interact with us. Now, what that means is an implication for how omni-channel businesses, or businesses which think about themselves as omni-channel, actually see the future pan out for them. Now, in that context, I actually echo a bit of what Amisha said, which is that even as things opened up, and this is in a scenario where, you know, still our Pepperfry Studios experience centers are allowed to open some days, not allowed to open some days, and there are many local conditions which are still, you know, in flux. But business has come back in the form of walk-ins to about close to 80-85% levels to what they used to be. So it's not as if customers are, you know, shy of the fact that they're looking to go and buy out in retail. If they have a need, they are looking to even, you know, try and do it in the offline world. So which is, you know, which makes for a great, I think, augur for an omni-channel business going forward. What it's also done is businesses in the past which used to think that they were only offline have now started thinking again omni-channel. And for them, it meant basically, what's the role that technology plays for us? How much do we go into e-commerce? How do we leverage this beast that's e-commerce, and so on? I think that's worked out quite well as a consequence of this. And it's something that I think all of us have focused on through the course of the last few months. The final piece, and this is where we made a lot of our investments, and some of them will see the light of day over the next few months, is if you do believe that it's the same customer and you need to interact with her whichever way she wants to interact with you, then I think the lines between online and offline, which were fairly blurry to begin with, will get blurred even more. And therefore, for any omni-channel business, it's super important to use tech which allows us to basically blur the lines between an offline experience of purchase and an online experience. In jargon, normally translates into people making investments behind AR and VR, but actually it goes beyond that. And I think it goes into things like, if you were to knock on a piece of furniture on your mobile phone, will you get the same response back as if you were knocking on wood? And those are things that I think we've started thinking about fairly seriously. We started building tech towards, and those are things which I think in the longer term will further help blur these lines. And therefore, we are all serving a common customer, and we are serving her whichever way she wants to be served. And I think that needs to be the goal of every business. I mean, I think increasingly post-COVID, perhaps sometimes businesses, and I don't know whether it applies to all businesses or few businesses or whatever, used to have the sense of playing God. And I think post-COVID that we've all become a little more humble. And therefore we interact with, the customer whichever way she wants to interact with us.
Coming to you, Amar, and what has been the biggest learning out of this pandemic situation that we are in? Because fashion was one of the worst hit category in retail sector. So now you said that demand is coming back. We are looking at festive season ahead of us. Major learnings that we have seen that could be implemented in the future as well in case of these crises?
I was saying we are still learning. The pandemic is not behind us. We're still in the pandemic.
Yeah, right.
But what has happened in last 6 months is we are heading towards a world of collaboration. Collaboration is the buzzword that is happening right now. What we are doing with the brands is completely different from what we used to do pre-COVID. The pre-COVID relationship was how much business can we do for you and how much commercial should we work out. It was more transactional than what it is right now. Today, if you look at the kind of conversations we're having, in fact, to Amisha's point, on-demand manufacturing has been called the silver bullet for fashion industry for a very, very long time. But there was almost no traction on that. COVID kind of expedited it. In fact, what we are doing is an e-commerce player. In fact, we call ourselves more of a fashion tech player than an e-commerce player, where we are giving those insights and intelligence back to the brands. And the way we're actually doing it is, some of the brands could not penetrate into tier 2, tier 3 because of the premiumness intimidation that they used to do before to the tier 2, tier 3 markets. What we are doing with the brands is we're helping them understand what sells in these regions. And we're actually creating special merchandising units, SMUs, from these brands that are applicable to tier 2, tier 3. And there are so many signals that we get as a tech player, as we get as an e-commerce player, that brands can obviously leverage to make these SMUs work for these geographies. And the third thing that we have done with the brands is it's no longer online versus offline. Omni has been a big investment for us. In fact, that's one of the investments we kind of expedited during pandemic. Today, we have close to 1,000 stores on our platform live, and we are serving. In fact, for almost 70, 80 brands, if you order, if you happen to be in Bangalore, and if you order, it will be delivered to you next day because it's coming from the store. It's no longer going through the entire e-commerce supply chain network. It's just coming from the store near you. So the dynamics are also changing. The brands are no longer saying, this is my online selection, this is my offline selection. This is the selection I have. How do we best expose this to the relevant consumer base? On the other side, the consumer side of things, we've started understanding customer more than ever. In fact, the tier 2, tier 3 growth, some of our panelists were mentioning about, we have seen that grow exponentially on our platform. But that also came, like we saw this huge top of the funnel traffic coming in from tier 2, tier 3, but the conversions were actually not happening, because that's when we realized our selection was never built for tier 2, tier 3. That's when we started working with the brands to see what actually goes in it. And if you understand the psyche of tier 2, tier 3, these are the set of people who would like to look like everybody else in the town. Now there is Myntra in town telling you to look different. So we had to do a lot of investments on our platform. In fact, we put a lot of content on the platform. We got a lot of influencers. Close to 2,000 influencers are today live on our platform, helping tier 2, tier 3 on how they can style themselves in a way that they stand out. And standing out is okay. Standing out is good. Standing out is something you should be doing. So there's a lot of investments on the consumer side that are happening. And on the supply side, we also have a house of brands where we also deal with a lot of supply things. And a lot of that ecosystem is now what we've done during pandemic, how we kind of engage them during this downtime that we were having, is what actually gained us a lot of trust, and more importantly, a very different relationship with our supply today. In fact, for the festive season, we are well positioned for the kind of demand we are anticipating because of the supply ecosystem partnering with us stronger than ever. So collaboration is the new buzzword, and we are trying to see the seller, the brands, the consumers in the more granular data-led way than ever before. So that's been our learning so far.
Abhi, yeah, please go ahead.
Just to add to that, and the thing which was going through my mind as I was hearing Amisha, Amrish, and Amar was actually many of the things that all three of them talked about, whether it was in terms of Omni, whether it was in terms of some of the others. Actually, there's no reason to say why those should not have happened without COVID as well, right? So I was thinking as to, what has happened in COVID to accelerate that. And, if you were to indulge me for a minute, I have, a very interesting experience. So, over the last 6 months, there is a group of health tech players and healthcare providers who have come together, to create this coalition alliance called Swasth, which basically, does telemedicine, does a bunch of digital health services, which is there, and combination of offline, online. And you actually have competitors coming together on the same platform, actually co-creating this together. And to my mind, one of the interesting things is the fact that, what COVID has done is created this sense of a crisis, right? Everybody is under constraint, and therefore collaboration, which was probably optional earlier, actually has now become a bit more compulsory, right? Because brands on their own or players on their own realized that they would be able to cover some ground. But if they were to come together, we will probably cover more ground together. So, that's the one hypothesis I would put as to why has some of this accelerated, because actually the crisis has forced people to work together, because on its own, it's difficult to solve, the problem either from a supply side perspective or demand side perspective, as the case may be, to have that. That's number one. Number two is the customer requirement, which is there has also been different. I'm not saying whether it is higher or lower or whatever, but different, which is also, forced companies to come together and do things differently. So I would say, if I look at the impact of COVID per se, it is forcing some of this, either acceleration or collaboration to happen. that's the one defining feature, and would be great to hear, if that rings true from the experience that the panelists have had.
No, Abhik, if I may comment,
Yeah.
you're spot on. In
Mm.
fact, this Omni discussions that we've been having with the brands, it started 2 years ago when I came to Myntra. That's when it started. But the adoption to it was more like from a pilot perspective. The brands who were doing really good on our platform could not say no to us, and hence they said, okay, let's do an experiment.
Yeah.
Necessity is what brought us together. What happened during pandemic was they had supply, we had demand. They didn't have demand, we didn't have supply. So we had to bring both the worlds together to serve the consumer. And now that this is happening, and now that the consumer also has seen the goodness of these two worlds coming together, we believe Omni is the future of retail.
Any other panelists wants to comment on this collaboration part?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So Varun, I think we spoke about the business, both supply and demand side. I would like to draw the learnings within the organization setup point of view, right? Pre-COVID, what stopped the organizations from working from home 100%? Right now, literally eBay, right now we are 100% work from home. And to my mind, productivity is increased. We have more collaboration because folks have adapted well, and also they know that they have to get the job done. In pre-COVID, there was no constraints. Right now we have constraints. We have, in fact, I feel I'm more closer to my sellers right now than pre-COVID because we have Zoom calls. Even the sellers oblige us on coming on the same platform. I've met more than 1,000 sellers in the last 6 months, which probably have not done in the last 5 years, to be candid. So from that point of view, your connect is improved. Your ability to, like the other panelists mentioned, collaboration is increased, and also mindsets have changed. I think that's the important aspects in terms of the way we want to work, and the autonomy and the freedom that we give for our employees has also increased because we know, you need to get the job done and the constraints are there. So right now we have 100% seller onboarding, which happens online. Earlier, my teams would say, hey, look, we need to go meet the seller before we onboard the seller. So right now, there are a lot of things have changed because your mindsets have changed, and also the way you think about the problem is also changed. I think the thinking mindset as well as your openness to try certain things has helped us shift the needle in the way we work and become much more productive than before.
Now, coming to the product mix that we are looking in the last 6 months, we are evolving our product mix. We are making products that makes more sense for the consumer during these times. So my question to all the panelists is, what kind of changes that we have done in our product mix, and what kind of things consumers are looking forward to during these time of crisis? Amrish, I was reading an interview of yours wherein you said that work and office furnitures were picking up. So in that way, I wanted to understand in all our respective fields, as in what changes have we done to the product mix to keep going? Anyone can take the question.
Sure. Let me go first. Let me give you a perspective on what, when India was under lockdown, for us, when we were exporting, the world was buying, right? So our COVID categories, as we internally classify, be it the masks, the sanitizers, or various other equipment related to COVID, has become a huge boost for us. So for us, from a supply point of view, we had tiger teams to completely take on the supply that is available in India to be exported. Obviously, the government came down and put some restrictions in between, but overall, I think that category for us has emerged significantly strong for us. Another thing which, again, the way we would classify in our global marketplace is different markets are under different evolution of COVID. So we are seeing different kind of demands across, be it in US, mainland Europe, or for that matter, Australia or New Zealand for that matter. So the way we look at it is broadly 4 categories. One is work from home essentials, basically anything to do to aid and improve your working from home. That categories are doing pretty well, and they peaked sometime in May. And for us, then there's the boredom categories. Basically the boredom busters, as we call it, where old is the new again. So basically your previous nostalgia events, your board games and things like that, that's again becoming very popular. For us, we've seen wooden toys and wooden blocks go up significantly higher. And then you have the DIY items, especially from a US business. We've seen the home and garden as well as yard maintenance and upkeep kind of categories doing pretty well for us. And then comes your essential categories. Like initially there was a lull, but jewelry is one of the major categories for us, a significant dominant category for us. We've seen significant uptake, contrary to what Amisha was saying earlier, where people were wanting to save, but we've seen some indulgence happening also, where people now wanting to buy diamond jewelry, which people were not willing to buy earlier. Now they're saying, hey, look, let's go indulge ourselves and get the feel-good factor back. So from that point of view, we've seen some of these categories, what we call the feel-good categories, coming back very strong for us. So significant plus in the COVID categories, as well as some of these hobbyist categories that we've seen significant demand crop up for us.
So I think, Varun, for us, given that we serve the belly of the country, right? If you were to think about it, we are kind of sitting at the price point, and from a brand and product perspective, quite relevant to that consumer who is, your traditional homemaker or your very early professional, right? Or my first job type of a consumer, right? Now, when you think about it, obviously their lives have shifted, right? When you look at these young professionals, there are several who've lost jobs. And then there are those who are now sitting and actually they are saving money on the other side. I go back to what I was saying, that look, there are people who are wanting to spend as well because they are kind of at home, not spending a lot, not traveling and saving. And then there's a homemaker who's also kind of trying to manage the nest egg, right? So you have different consumer profiles and they are behaving very differently. Right, your young professionals actually have, for the first time, have seen that there is something called loss of a job in a country like ours. Right, some of us who've had the luxury of seeing a lot of years behind us have seen downturns in different shapes or form, but a lot of this workforce hasn't, and they are our consumers, right? So I think what we see is pockets look very different. City tiers look very different. You cannot generalize things within a city tier also, right? And so for us, what has happened is, first and foremost, what we found is that hygiene has gone up in their thinking, right? And hence, when it comes to whether I'm wanting to shop an antimicrobial panty to looking at the right bra for myself, I think consumers are first and foremost thinking hygiene and then going and saying, okay, I need comfort from my home, comfort of just generally, there's always this concept of comfort food. There's also this concept of stress busting through comfort wear, right? And I think that is also kind of come into play as well. So we're seeing a shift towards that. So when I look at our intimate wear categories, I see within even the bra segments, we're seeing that there is a shift between what the consumer is looking to buy, right? Obviously, because I was doing social outing earlier, I was trying to pair it with, a certain type of bra with my certain type of outerwear. Now I'm doing a very different, my day looks very different. So obviously my requirement looks different. A lot of consumers wrote to us saying that, hey, can you guys just ship to me, even if you're not shipping, because I don't have homeware clothes, So I think there is that shift as well. A lot of people realize that I do not have that many clothes to wear at home, or I don't have loungewear. And also while gyms were out, a lot of people have moved into an active lifestyle in whatever way, shape or form they could do it, even if they couldn't go out. So again, they're buying for that, right? And so for us, what has changed is a shift within the categories. A big shift that has happened for us is, I don't know how many of you remember this, but actually about a year ago, people were talking about that, look, there is, these Parle-G biscuits are reducing in sales in certain tiers. And then people started looking at, innerwear ko kya ho raha hai, right? They wanted to kind of figure out that, is this really showing that, there is some kind of decline? At that time also, we were growing significantly, And what we see today is that there is a very distinctive classification that got created for a category, which is that it's essential. It's the elasticity of the category, of the demand and the price kind of, came to the forefront. It's quite heartening. I mean, those are some of the differences. So to your question on portfolio, I think the portfolio runs beyond just the mix, but also runs to within the realm of, okay, am I buying when I'm building because we are a concept to shelf company, right? I mean, 90% of our sort of sales are our own brand. And when we look at the portfolio we're building, her ask is changing. What we're finding, searches have shifted in what people are looking for. There is certain seasonality in some of our lines like sleepwear, etc., where that continues to be there. But in general, there is a larger movement towards comfort. In general, there's a larger movement towards hygiene. And there is this thing of get me the right product. So I don't see people, what I do see people do is buy a good product at the right price. They want quality. And so I'm okay, I don't have 5 of those, but I'm going to make sure I get the right product, right? Those are some of the shifts we are seeing. Now, what is going to stay is the larger question, right? Because a lot of this is responding to the here and now. I do believe that, we will bounce back. The world will go back as soon as the flood, things open, whether vaccine or not. I do see people kind of going out of their homes, right? So I think people are going back, and people are really wanting to celebrate. So I am actually seeing other parts of the categories now bounce back as well. So, whether it is, as we see festive, it's no longer limited to, I'm going to go and buy only limited, a few things which are about my fit and comfort. Now it is moving to, I am going to wear a certain type of dress at puja. I'm going to pair it with a certain type of innerwear as well. So I think, in a nutshell, I do believe that there is a short-term trend, but I think the inherent consumerism of this country, I'm optimistic. I think it is coming back. At least our data says that it is coming back. So probably another 6 months, but I think we'll see a massive shift.
Ambrish, your views on the product mix, what you have been doing? Yeah.
Thanks, Varun. Expectedly, the work from home components of people's furniture have gone up. However, I actually don't think that change is as stark as we would all think. I mean, so it's not as if like that's become 80% of our business courtesy COVID and that's all, right? So it used to be a minuscule part of the business. Not all houses were equipped or fitted out to even have the space to be able to put up a work desk and an appropriate chair. And I think that constraint continued. I mean, it continues through COVID times. So while the category has gone up, it's about 10-15% of the business today. I mean, so it's picked up. However, it's not become the defining furniture purchase for Indian consumers. I think what's changed is all the rest of the categories have picked up, right? So it's not as if people are only buying study desks; they're also replacing sofas, or they're replacing dining tables, and they're replacing storage. What's interesting is that average purchase prices have gone up. People are investing behind more expensive stuff. The average order values in general in the category have gone up significantly over the last 6 months period. That means that people are willing to buy, and I think part of what Amisha said, I resonate with. I mean, they are willing to buy not just cheap stuff at a very low price, but they're willing to pay for quality stuff to come into their homes. So I think that's the mix that we've been seeing. That's the shift that we've been seeing. We've been seeing secular growth across all categories. We've been seeing the fact that work from home, while important, still constitutes a small percent of the business. And we've been seeing an increase in the average purchase prices by customers across the board.
So Amar, you have been seeing average prices going up in your segment?
Let me actually take a step back and answer your question in a different way. We've been traditionally strong in metro tier 1 markets for the last 10 years. The last 6 months has given us enormous share in tier 2, tier 3. And what we've also quickly realized is the demand was not consistent between metro tier 1 and tier 2, tier 3. Metro tier 1, it used to be occasion wear. It used to be social meeting wear, which usually is high ASP. Now it has reduced to, or it has changed to, I should say, above the waist fashion for obvious reasons. It's work from home. It's how you represent yourself in front of the camera. So that's not same as occasion-led wear. The second thing that is also gaining traction with metro tier 1 is, like Amisha said, people are becoming very active at homes. So there's a lot of athleisure wear they are getting into. There's a lot of active gear they are getting into. And also the work from home essentials. Be it, it's a combination of comfort and casual style coming together for the consumers to work from homes. When you look at metro, when you look at tier 2, tier 3, the ethnic wear is actually the one that is on the demand. So they're not buying any different from what they used to buy before pandemic. They're buying online because their nearest store is shut, or they could not go to the nearest store for whatever reason when we started coming after Unlock 1.0. So the ethnic wear is on the rise. So that's the stark difference between metro tier 1 and tier 2, tier 3. Now we're coming to the commonalities. What COVID has done is also normalize certain fashion needs across the geographies. The first one is hygiene. Like again, Amisha said, people are now, the self-grooming is the new trending thing. People are buying these trimmers, even tier 2, tier 3, they're buying trimmers, they're doing it themselves. So people have become very cautious about hygiene thing. Do it yourself kind of face mask, not the COVID mask, the face mask that the women apply. So there are a lot of things that we did not expect would actually took off even in tier 2, tier 3. Kids is one more category where it has been phenomenally doing well on our platform. In fact, some of our brand partners, H&M, they ran out of stock during the first ERS event we did in June. These are the categories where we saw the traction. Where we are not seeing traction is the formal wear, where we're not seeing traction is the sports footwear, again, for obvious reasons. What customers expected in the first 4 months was quality stuff at affordable price. Savings, I agree with Amisha here, savings is at the top of their mind. But what we've also realized in the last 2 months, especially ever since Rakhi and Ganesh Chaturthi happened, there is again a demand coming back for the premium stuff. People want to celebrate. People want to go back to that life that they always enjoy. Now, probably they are more appreciating it than before. So that is what is exciting for us going into the festive season. And again, like some of the panelists said, this festive season is not about what you would usually wear in a festival season. It's actually about everything. Our home decor products have gone up in demand. People want to do their homes. There are a lot of stuff that you can put together to make your home more, even the curtains, even the bedspreads, everything just flying off the shelf right now. So this festive season is going to be a much needed positive change in the minds of consumers, and that's what we are committed to. In fact, this festive season, we put together 9 lakh styles on the platform, the largest selection we've ever put together. What we were able to do with all the brand partners is secure the selection in a way that we don't turn away any demand that we did in the first 4 months. So there are a lot of learnings that we are taking from the last 4 months to serve the next 3 months, 4 months of the festive season. Now, the bigger question is what is going to happen once we go back to the normalcy. We don't know what the new normalcy is. So that's also something we are proactively working. In fact, in tier 2, tier 3, what we realized from our data is people are checking out these fast fashion or the fashion forward trends, but not converting on those styles. And when we double clicked on it, a couple of things. One is the moderate styling is what they would prefer over what we have on the platform. The second one is the pricing. So we started working, this is what I was referring to earlier. We started doing SMUs with the brands, which are in line with the tier 2, tier 3 aspirations, not needs. The whole idea is to actually take them to the next level of the fashion quotient that Myntra can do. And we are working with the brand partners to do it. So that's how we're seeing the mix changing, and it's still evolving as we speak.
Abhi, you want to comment?
Yeah, I'd like to, put my view in a slightly de-averaged manner, and just to be, a bit facetious, I think averages hide a lot of things. Right? I think the fact that, like one of my friends says, if you have your feet in cold water and your head in the refrigerator, doesn't mean that on an average you are fine. And I think we are seeing that exactly. Right? There are pockets either in terms of geographies, which are actually doing very well. You're seeing pockets in terms of consumers who are doing very well. But if I had to project it forward, the two hypotheses that I would put on the plate. Number one, I completely agree with what Amar and Amisha were saying. I think festive is probably going to be better than what most people are thinking it is going to be because of this pent up, people want to feel a bit good about themselves, so it is going to throw a positive surprise. I think, but the question, I think, which is an important sobering counter to that is we are 6 months into the crisis, right? Whenever the pandemic comes, whenever normalcy happens, whenever the economy gets back, I don't see that happening for at least another year, if not more, right? So it's not as if, there's going to be a switch on, which is going to suddenly happen. So it is going to be pockets of up and down, which are going to continue to happen. And to my mind, that's the one very interesting place where e-commerce has a unique advantage. If you compare to other businesses, in terms of the flow of information, in terms of direct understanding of what consumers are buying or not buying in what part of the country and so on, the use of that data, having access to that data and being able to act on that data, I think is one place where e-commerce actually has an advantage over others. And we've not talked about it so far, but I think that gives e-commerce players the ability to match the up downs in terms of demand. It gives e-commerce players the ability to personalize to the extent possible. If done well, it actually allows e-commerce players to simplify their offering while offering variety, right? So I'm I'm sure that when Amar is talking about offering 9 lakh options or variety, it is not at the complexity which which a conventional player would provide. So if you look at those things in tandem, we are going to see this up and down, which is going to happen for some time. Compared to any other players, people who have direct access to customers, people who have direct access to that information, who have greater control over their ecosystem, are actually going to be well positioned to win going forward. And I think that's sort of the hidden business model question, ability to act question. I think that's the place where I see the e-commerce advantage working better compared to, let's say, a non-e-commerce, if there exists a non-e-commerce world.
So we'll just take the views of all the panelists for one last question because we have already overshot the time. So we'll start with Abhik only. So Abhik, what would be the most important focus area for e-commerce players going ahead? Earlier we say that it was discount. It was all about discounts and convenience. But now, what do you think going ahead in the new normal, the focus should be?
I think it will vary by category, but if I had to generalize, I think, drawing that triangle between simplifying, personalizing, and working in collaboration. I think whoever will be able to do the right combination of the three in order to meet the customer demand, right? And the only way to do that is to understand what the consumer wants. E-commerce players are best positioned to do that compared to others who have indirect access. If they can simplify their model to do that so that they're not adding cost or complexity and not try to do everything themselves, but in collaboration, I think the combination of the three is what we will see e-commerce players going to forward. And I think if I look at examples from China, because candidly, I believe that the innovations in e-commerce are actually happening more on the east of India rather than on the west of India. I think if I look at what Chinese e-commerce players are doing, and not only the Alis and JDs of the world, but across the board, you see greater usage of that resulting in success.
Let's just ask the brands where the focus would be on. Amisha, your views on that?
Yeah, so I think I resonate with one part of it, which is, I think, focus on supply chain. But I'll just probably add to that a week, which is, I think that is a required and absolutely imperative thing for any business to do at this point, right? I mean, you cannot be under the weight of your own inventory or your supplies, right? So I think that is a non-negotiable for us. But I think for us, I think a very heavy investment further into data sciences, I would say, and which can trigger and go into the same point that he was making, which is personalization is absolutely critical. And I'm not talking again, the jing bang of personalization, right? There's something that is kind of meaningful to her that can really make it relevant. And we are a category which, and that's what our platform's about. I mean, it's more about sort of making it relevant for her, right? So I think ensuring that experience she has is personalized. And I'd like to take this step forward and say that it is not about e-commerce, right? Because we are trying to bring that offline experience to her, right? The reason we went into stores is to give that consumer that doesn't enjoy the screen in front is to get that personalized experience. So I think how do you kind of convert that experience, which is whether I get my, which is where we built our, for example, our Fitco, or whether you do it offline or online, how do you ensure that the fit code is actually relevant to her and is meaningful, right? And is very, very impactful for her to give her that fit and comfort. So I think personalizing that entire journey as she comes into the platform, ensuring that it is only about her. In an ideal world, it would be that, I have a site for Amisha, right? Now, I think a lot of people have been talking about personalization for a very long time, but I think it needs to kind of come down to the relevance of personalization as well, right? It cannot be just this peanut butter conversation that we have around it. For me, the second big thing is, as I see that there is a segment of consumers opening up, right? This whole idea of assisted shopping, whether it is technology around it, right? So we've had technology around, which is around chatbots, etc. And now people are building on it. I think for us, what is important is how do you assist her, whether it is voice-based shopping or whether, again, it is hand-holding her through the alternate mediums of mobile shopping, right? So for us, that piece is critical. The third, and I might kind of, have a very different point of view from what Amar was saying, is curation. And the reason I say that is because, the kind of consumers that are coming into the fold now also need a lot of simplified experience, not only on your platform, on your app, but also at some level, what we've noticed get overwhelmed. And especially in our category, I think I'm talking more from a relevance from our perspective, is that she needs to know what is right for her, right? And the moment you overload her, e-commerce just starts becoming extremely daunting for her. And that's why she actually chooses to go offline. Like when I do a lot of these focus groups in our offline spaces, one thing you learn is that she finds that a curated small little store helps her a lot more, because it is personalized, hand-sold her, and ensures that it is all about her, right? So the question now for us is, we're literally looking at it from that lens and saying that I'm going to create this online. So for us, the step forward is to make sure that we create that experience online, but at the same time, for us, both are equal part channels for us. So, how do we ensure that we leverage the power of technology to keep our inventory in control, which is where data comes in. So for me, largely that's the direction this will go.
Sure. Ambrish, for Pepperfry, what do you think would be the focus area going ahead?
Two things I think I would call out. One would be, and I mentioned it earlier, is blurring the lines between online and offline. I think the more successfully we do it, the more we make that into the new normal for customers.
Right.
And therefore, investments behind VR, AR. Think about a scenario where a customer could walk into a small, let's call it an express store, less than 500 square feet in a mall, be able to put on a VR kit and have access to the flat layouts, as well as be in the flat for all the new residential development that's happening in a 5-kilometer radius around that particular store, right? What you've suddenly done is you brought online to life in the offline world for the consumer, and then you can look to replicate this while they're sitting in front of their laptop. So I think there's a massive advantage and an opportunity to define shopping trends by blurring the lines between online and offline. The second aspect, and I think I'm taking a slightly more business view on this. Almost every single process in our businesses, I think has, to some extent or the other, needed to be re-engineered over the last 6 months. Now, whenever that happens, there is an opportunity for us to figure out wherever there's flab, is to remove it, is to reduce costs, improve our unit economics. And therefore, I think e-commerce in India is sitting in this has a remarkable opportunity to drive for profitability. And I think that's something that, for years now, the losses of the e-commerce industry have been the topic of all conversations across the board. I think there is an opportunity now for businesses to truly turn profitable and do so in the right manner by serving the right customer in the right manner with better engineered processes and through having a very tight control on costs. And I think that opportunity presents itself, and especially for Pepperfry, we would want to make the most out of that opportunity. So I think these are the two things: blurring the lines between online and offline, and going hell for leather towards profitability and beyond. Establish yourselves as tenable businesses, which are not only in need of capital infusion at all points in time. So those are the two goals that I would take on, and I think that's what we will focus on.
Vidmay, your views?
Well, just to take on what Ambrish just said, thankfully for us, we are a profitable and very high margin business. So that's not going to be the focus for us. But what's going to be the focus for us is how do you make, just to step back. Now, from a seller's point of view, I think three things are pretty much universal, whether it's domestic or international. One, ease of doing business, cost of doing business, and velocity. I think from an exports point of view, especially B2C exports, I think ease of doing business and cost of doing business is a main issue that we have. And we've been working with the government and various governmental agencies to making ease of doing business more simplified. For example, even now as we speak, e-commerce retail exports is pretty much treated at par with offline exports, right? So you need to have 14 documentation if you want to send a $2 earring out. So it becomes very cumbersome, and thereby there's a lot of hidden costs with that as well. So ease of doing business, cost of doing business, I think we are in constant touch with the government and the government agencies. We work with DPIIT very closely, and we made progress. I think a lot more needs to be done. I think our focus is going to be on that, number one. Number two, we compete in the global marketplaces, and hence we are competing with sellers from different countries. So the ease of shipment as well as return shipments, as far as experience is concerned from the consumer, is pretty much simplified, be it in terms of process as well as cost. I think we've been working with various partners on that, and we continue to work with that. Unfortunately, on this parameter, we had made significant strides in the last 2 years of restart of our operations. COVID coming in and commercial airlines not flying, the increased cost of shipment has hurt us significantly. I think this is another area that we're going to focus in the near term, medium to long term. And finally, I think from a longer term perspective, made in India and India-based competitive products needs to be well positioned in the global markets. We need to be known for certain products. We are known for certain products. I think amplifying that message in the global marketplaces so that Indian sellers get an advantage is something that we are focused on. So in a nutshell, these are the three main areas that we are focusing going forward.
Amar will take your views and then we'll close this discussion. So
Sure.
please let us know what you think about it.
So our investments are threefold. The first one and the foremost one for us is our employees. Protect our employees, safeguard our employees, because that's the biggest asset as a business we have. What I've learned in last 2 years, especially in last 7 months, is any differentiation we have built can be mimicked by the competition in less than 90 days. The only differentiation that will help you survive any kind of like pandemic kind of situation is the talent and how they come together. And in the last 6 months, we've invested into our employee well-being. In fact, we've enforced the mandatory leaves on our employees. Like, please take the leave. Even if you don't have anything to do, you don't have to step out. Just take the leave. Don't work. And there is absolutely no meeting Wednesdays that we follow. Like, people don't get into any meetings, and it's enforced from my office directly. So employee is one big investment. The second big investment is our understanding of consumer. We've been a fashion tech player. We started as a tech player, but that investment is also going significantly higher. And we want to turn this understanding into intelligence, which can be acted upon by the brand partners. So the third one is actually working with the brand partners to turn this intelligence, to make this intelligence work in a way that we can increase the value proposition for our consumers. And in the end, create value both for us and for our brand partners. It's as simple as that.
So with this, we'll come to an end of this interesting panel discussion. Thank you very much to all the panelists for making the discussion so lively. And thank you for the audience for tuning in. Stay tuned for more. Thank you.
Thanks, Varun.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for detailed discussion. With this, we'll move on to the next session. Stay connected and keep tweeting using the hashtag ETRetailBLS.